He thought he'd left me for dead. The cold air burned my lungs, and every sound of the forest reminded me how small I was, how forgotten I'd become. But when he drove away, smiling like he'd won, he didn't realize one thing. I don't disappear that easily. When he came home, I was already waiting for him, and I wasn't alone. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, someone you would have done anything for, then you'll understand what comes next. Because this isn't just a story about revenge. It's about what happens when trust breaks, when love turns into silence, and when silence becomes justice. They call it cold tiger for a reason. The air out there bites through your skin like claws, and the silence. It's the kind that swallows your heartbeat whole. My son James and I had gone camping there since he was little. Back then, it was marshmallows and ghost stories. Now, it was supposed to be a father-son weekend, a chance to reconnect. At least, that's what he said. But looking back now, I realize that trip was never about bonding. It was about control. The argument started over something small. It always does. I questioned another one of his investment ideas. A new condo project, supposedly backed by friends with connections. I told him it sounded risky, that he needed to slow down, think things through. He snapped. "You never believe in me, Dad. You think I'm useless." His voice echoed through the trees, sharp and cold. Before I could answer, he stormed out of the tent, muttering under his breath. The last thing I saw before the flap dropped was the firelight flickering across his angry face. That night, the temperature dropped below freezing. I woke up to silence and an emptiness that made my stomach twist. My truck was gone. My phone battery had died. My son had left me there alone in the middle of cold tiger. I don't remember the first hour of walking. I remember the pain, my knees locking, the frost crawling into my bones, the breath that cut my throat every time I inhaled. I told myself he must have gone for help, that maybe it was a misunderstanding. But deep down, a voice whispered, he wanted this. It took nearly a full day to reach the main road. A truck driver saw me waving like a madman and pulled over. When I finally made it home, it was past midnight. James's car was in the driveway. The lights were on. Music was playing. He was fine. He looked up when I walked in, and the shock on his face was worth every frozen mile I'd walked. "Dad, Yuri stammered. Alive," I said, my voice quiet and steady. "Yeah, guess I'm harder to get rid of than you thought." He tried to explain, saying he thought I'd gone for a walk, that he panicked and drove off. But his eyes told me the truth. He hadn't panicked, he planned. That night, I didn't shout. I didn't throw things. I didn't even ask why. I just said, "We'll talk about this later." Because in that moment, I understood something most people never do. Revenge isn't about anger. It's about patience. A week later, James showed up in my office like nothing had happened. He tossed a folder on my desk. Inside were glossy brochures of Mountain View condos and printed charts full of promises. "Dad, this is exactly what Jennifer and I need," he said. "It's a sure thing. I just need $50,000 to secure the deal." I'll lean back in my chair, watching him perform. The same confident grin. The same tone I'd heard 2 years ago when he convinced me to lend him $8,000 for another guaranteed opportunity. That money had vanished, just like his apologies. "I lent you before," I said evenly. "That money never came back." He forced a laugh. "This is different. It's real this time." But I saw it. That flicker of guilt behind his confidence. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just recklessness. This was a pattern, and it had to end. A few days later, we met at a diner on the edge of town. He wanted to clear the air. I let him talk. He avoided the camping trip entirely. Not one word about leaving me to freeze. Instead, he talked about opportunities, about the market, about how the past is the past. I stirred my coffee slowly and listened. He thought silence meant forgiveness, but it meant planning. As he spoke, I looked at him and saw the boy I'd raised. Charming, clever, and utterly lost. But this version of James wasn't my son. He was a man who'd learned to lie with a smile. That's when I made my decision. He wanted me gone from his life? Fine. But I'd make sure everything false went with me. I started digging. Quietly. Patiently. The condo project? A scam. His so-called partners? 2 of them had fraud charges from California. He'd been using investor funds to pay off old debts, even taking money from Jennifer's parents. Every lie was documented. Every number had a trail. So I did what any accountant would do. I built a file. I traced every cent. And when the story was airtight, I sent copies to everyone involved, the investors, the partners, even the local financial board. A week later, James burst through my front door. His face was red, his voice shaking with rage. "You ruined me," he shouted. "No," I said quietly. "You ruined yourself. I just handed everyone the truth." He pointed a finger at me, trembling. "You think this makes you the hero? You're destroying my life." I stood up slowly and met his eyes. "You destroyed mine the moment you left me in that forest." He froze, speechless. And for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen since he was a child: fear. That night, I called him again, told him to come over. He hesitated, but he came. When he walked in, there were 3 other men sitting in my living room, my friends, former investors. One of them was from the very condo group he'd conned. James stopped at the door. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low. "Justice," I said. He looked around, realizing there was no easy way out. One of the men slammed a folder onto the table. Every document, every message, every forged signature. "You'll be hearing from our lawyers," the man said coldly. James turned to me, desperate now. "Dad, please." I stepped closer. My voice was steady, calm, and final. "Son, meet my friends. Betrayal has a price." He looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe the man he left behind in cold Tiger had died out there after all. What stood before him now was someone new, someone who'd learned that silence is sharper than any blade. When he finally left that night, he wasn't angry anymore. He was broken, and for the first time in years, I felt warm. In the weeks that followed, James lost everything: the investors, the condo project, even Jennifer. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't post about it or tell the story to anyone else. Because some revenge doesn't need an audience. Sometimes, revenge isn't fireworks. It's watching the person who betrayed you face the world they built with their own lies. A month later, I went back to Cold Tiger. I stood where I'd nearly frozen and watched the sunrise spill across the trees. The same wind that once cut through me now felt like peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. Sometimes, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about justice. About showing someone what it really means to be left alone in the cold. Because betrayal doesn't end relationships. It reveals them. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and drop a comment. Would you have forgiven him or done the same? And don't forget to subscribe, because next time you'll hear another story where karma doesn't whisper, it roars.